Welcome to the weekly briefing. Thank you all for joining me. As you can see, we are Tim Thompson-less this afternoon. So when the cat's away, I get to talk about whatever I want, and per usual, that means I get to talk about sales. So I am excited about this, as always. And if you were with me a few weeks ago, um, we talked about one of my favorite conversations, although it turned into a very quantitative conversation, which is what should you be measuring in your sales practice? And so I wanted to talk about that again for a minute, but then I wanted to break that down in a much more qualitative way and talk about what it really means to have a sales conversation if we're not pitching. Um, what does it mean to be getting involved in prospects? I think early in the year, it's a really good conversation to be having. So, as a little bit of a recap, when we chatted sales a few weeks ago, as I said, it felt quite quantitative, but we really kind of broke down the difference between leading indicators and lagging indicators in your sales practice and the metrics you can and can't be tracking daily. That landed in an interesting place in that, in my strong opinion, the best leading indicator for your business is the number of sales conversations you're having daily. You can extrapolate that out to your invite to pitch rate, your win rate, your average project size, and get to some number that looks like a revenue number. You can also obviously go the other way, right? You can work backwards from a revenue goal to your average project size. How often are you winning pitches? How often are you even invited to pitch? And how many prospects are you even meeting with? Folks you call leads, the earliest stage in the pipeline in your CRM, if you will. And then you can get to a place where you're asking yourself, how many conversations do I need to be having at the earliest stage of sort of my sales practice to even create the opportunity set required to have a chance at hitting my revenue goal? So, all of that, I think, is the right thinking for putting the right leading indicators in place. But so, since that weekly briefing was 3 or 4 weeks ago, I've actually had a handful of really, really interesting conversations about this topic. When I say sales conversations, I leave them pretty open-ended on purpose. They're obviously not pitches. That's why I use that language. That's why they're structured that way. But if they're not that thing, then what are they? Right? Are they capes meetings? Are they soft pitches actually? And I'm just saying they're sales conversations because I'm a sales consultant, right? Do I fucking show people my reel? Or I've had a lot of conversations with other folks who want to go the other way. Um, do I just talk about myself? Do I just take people out for coffee and try and be cool, right? Ask people about their kids, hope upon hope that they like me and I'm fun and I'm relevant. And then, like, I leave. And then when they have work that's relevant to me, they're going to remember me and then they're going to give me a call. I can tell you it's neither of those things. Those are extremes on either end of a spectrum for what a sales conversation actually is. And I wanted to take this time to open the conversation up, but also to break down what it means to have a conversation at a very early stage with a prospect. That gets us to a place where we're remembered, that gets us to a place that sets us up to follow up, and that keeps the engine of our new business machine sort of churning, especially at this early place in the year. And thank you, Phil, always a documenter, for throwing those numbers in there. I think it's really interesting. If we're talking about sales conversations, 36 conversations breaks down to two a day. And then you can extrapolate two conversations out a day based on, again, invite to pitch rate, if that's sort of your thing, your close rate, average project size. And you can figure out very quickly the number of conversations you're having a day, again, sort of the total funnel.
What was the starting number of the amount of leads?
Wait, sorry, say that again, Phil.
What was the starting number? Like I didn't get the number on top. Like I think it was like 2,000 people we need to talk to every month to get to 36 conversation, but forgot.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you could just extrapolate that monthly number out to get to the yearly number, but it was something like if we needed to close, at like a 25% win rate. That's what it was. A 25% win rate. And then I just assume that you're winning 1 in 4 of your kind of like lowest value projects. That's just loose math. But so we can work with it that way. So the math there is good, and we can always like if you ever want to talk about actually putting math involved in setting your goals, we can always talk about that. I think all of that is good to have. But today I want to talk a little bit more about what it means to like show up with a prospect and have a conversation that is useful and not just sort of like swinging in on a vine and being like, hey, do you want to get coffee? And then hoping the thing that happens on the other side of that is that you walk away with enough goodwill that work comes out of it, which I find way too often is how we treat the early stages of the new business process. And then we're confused at the end of the year why we don't have depth to our new business pipeline. And we're confused why the projects didn't roll in after we felt so much good energy at the beginning of the year coming off. So I think we can break it down. And I want to break that down in some keys. I put it in keys. It was 5 in my head when I started. I think the truth is that it's actually 6 because I kept adding things. Um, 5 seems like a nice round number, but it was actually 6. All right. So there are 6 keys that I sort of wrote down for how to handle these conversations. And when I say a conversation, I mean it's a prospect, past client, maybe it's a current client that you haven't worked with in a while, maybe it's a human being that you met anywhere, um, a networking event, you reached out to them on LinkedIn, maybe you met them at your kid's school, right? Fill in the blank for someone that you may do business with and you need to have a conversation with before they're ready to hand you a project or an RFP. The very, very first thing, and it's crazy how many leaders I work with who skip this step, is very simply to set your intentions. What I mean by that is ask yourself, what is your ideal potential relationship with this person and this organization? And I find it helps to be radically specific. What would the work look like? Would it be project-based work or retainer-based work? Do you want to make this type of thing for this type of project or this type of product? What would the size of that project be? What team members would go in it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Dream dreams and don't be afraid of the fact that it's weird to be 1,000 steps ahead of yourself before you've even had coffee with this person, right? Or a Zoom meeting or whatever it is. What would your ideal potential relationship be? And go ahead and dream it up. The more specific you are, the more likely you are to sort of like see how it could happen and see what's standing in the way. What would have to happen for you for that relationship to take place? And honestly, what would be standing in the way? What, if any, objections could you anticipate to that actually happening? Do you think they have competitive partners that you could ask around? Do you think that they even have budget for the thing that you want to make? Does the thing that you want to do with this particular organization feel like it's a priority to them? Each of these things that you're thinking in your head become things that you could potentially talk about, but you wouldn't be prepared to do so unless they brought it up, unless you're preparing and setting your intentions accordingly. Similarly, I find it to be really important to work backwards from that ideal relationship to the conversation you're about to have. What's the one thing that you could feasibly do, that could feasibly happen today, that could move you forward, even if it's a teeny tiny bit forward, toward that potential future that you've sort of dreamed up in your head and you don't have to tell them out loud that you did, right? I don't know. Is it getting on their vendor list? Is it getting an MSA? Is it actually just getting the CAPES meeting that you wish you were having, but first you have to have this sort of like introductory meeting? Is it getting a brief for a project that's not quite ready, but it could be. It could be any of these things, right? But if you know what the ideal potential future is, and you know what the possible outcome of this meeting that would move you toward this future is, now you have a place that you can steer this conversation toward. I do want to pause and say when you're having a conversation with a human being, obviously you don't know where it's going to go, right? It would be weird if you went into a conversation with a script and you tried to nudge them toward an outcome. That's, of course, not how any of this works. But if you weren't prepared with these intentions, you would never know where to steer it toward if you had the opportunity to ask. And so, even the step of setting intentions will help you when the opportunity arises to say the right words to move toward the future that you want. And if you skip this step, it'll never get there. And so, I think the very first key for each of these conversations is just do the part where you say the thing you want to yourself and say what it would take to get there. Maybe it comes up or maybe it doesn't, but don't skip it. The second key for this sales conversation for me is very simple again, and it's preparation. Again, seems overlooked, but it will shock each and every one of you how many of my clients I talk to and say, how does that go? And they'll say, it went okay. I'll say, how much preparation time did you put in that meeting? And I'll hear something like, I was back to back with another client. We were on creative reviews and my mind was elsewhere. And I will say, this is a new business meeting and you need new business to sustain your organization, your firm. How the fuck could your mind have been elsewhere? It makes no sense to me that preparation shouldn't be priority 1A, or in this case, 1B, it's key number two, uh, in your new business sales conversation focus. So I say a thing often that I think is worth repeating here is that I say that every pitch is a performance and every performer prepares. This isn't strictly speaking a pitch, but you are pitching yourself. Do you think an actor, a musician, a comedian, whoever, do you think they get on stage without knowing the words that they're about to say? Of course, no. So I would challenge each and every one of you the next time you're in a sales situation, even an informal meeting, to think of some of the words that you intend to say out loud to the human being you're about to interact with, and then test them. Do they sound weird coming out of your mouth? Um, I personally practice a lot of the things I say in front of a mirror. Sometimes I'll record them on a Zoom and listen to them back. If they sound weird coming out of your mouth, you probably shouldn't say them. You should probably think of other words. Um, Even just running through allows you to catch things that don't sound right. Maybe catch things that you thought were smart or clever or useful to articulate that don't end up being so. These things matter when you want to be memorable, when you want to move a business relationship forward, and when you want to look and feel and sound like someone that another person wants to do business with. So it helps to be prepared in the same way that it helps to know what you want out of a meeting. And when we're talking about a conversation that doesn't have a defined project attached, that doesn't have a defined budget attached, that we may or may not know is going to lead to anything that feels like new business, it's really easy to say these are the things that I don't have to worry about until it's time for me to put a deck together, right? And they're going to see all of my creative prowess sort of like uh, put forth, but it matters at these early stages as much, if not more than ever. The third key for these conversations for me is to engage with emotion. And I think when we start to probe around about the potential for working together with a prospective client, it can often feel like a super weird thing to bring up. Obviously, you don't want to look like you've shown up with your hand out, like, hey, you got a project for me, right? And you do want to position yourself as being helpful to a person or to an organization vis-a-vis their larger business agenda. But fuck, if I hear one more guru saying something like, find out how you can help solve their business goals, like I'm just going to scream and light my hair on fire and I'm going to quit LinkedIn and then I'm going to quit consulting forever. It's like if someone asked me out for coffee and then they sat down and said, so Joe, what are your business goals? Like I would just fucking leave. You know what I mean? Like what kind of thing is that to say to another person? And there's no way to frame that that isn't the worst question you've ever been asked. I don't, have any of you ever been asked that question by someone who wants to sell you a thing? So tell me about your business goals. Like, no, what? That's an insane thing to do. And it's not a good way to position yourself as a partner, even though if you knew the answer to that question, you could probably help, right? As creatives, we want that information because we come up with solutions to those problems. That is what we do. And it's the way we want to position ourselves. But if we just ask the thing that way, we look weird. So the simplest way that I've found to get these get folks talking and to intuit the information that we're looking for so that we can have the conversations we want to have is to engage with a couple of questions that are emotional in nature but light enough to start a conversation. Very simply, what are you excited about? Either what are you working on currently or what's coming up? And then what do you wish you were doing more of? Same thing, either currently or in the future. And then it really, really helps to have the answers to those two questions for you and for your firm in the same way in the event that they fire those questions back at you. I have come unprepared in the past with the answers to those for my own firm, and it has been weird. So have the answers to those questions for yourself. But I love the question, what are you working on now that you're excited about? Or what do you have coming up this year that you're excited about if you want to put them in a future forward mindset? The idea that you focus on excitement um, opens up something a little bit lighter in nature. It's typically not particularly triggering, but you can engage them like a real person and you can listen for some of those business goal type of questions. When you ask a human being, what do you wish you were doing more of? You're typically triggering a little bit of longing and sometimes, actually very often, envy of competitors is what comes out of that. And I find that to be very, very interesting information when we're talking about putting together what are your business goals for the year type of information that you want to know so that you could structure a useful response and how you could be helpful. But we can get that type of information in a way that frames you like a good listener, frames you like a thoughtful speaker, and does not frame you like someone who listened to a gross LinkedIn consultant that very morning and tried their tactics. Well, it's just not the best look. When we when we can engage like a person in an emotional way, we're going to end up being someone that they remember. And again, when we're at these very early stages in in our sort of sales journey, the best thing we can do is be remembered, and the worst thing we can do is say something forgettable. I've got another key that for me for a very long time was the trickiest one. And once I was able to unlock it, it allowed these conversations to feel more natural for me and feel less, frankly, terrifying. And it's to master medium talk. So when you're having a conversation that isn't tied to a specific business need, again, not to a specific project or a budget or like they didn't call you because they want you to work on a thing, and you're going to have to talk about stuff that isn't specifically business. That is, of course, the way those things go, whether it's a Zoom or a coffee or a lunch or whatever the situation may be. But like honestly, raise your hand if that also terrifies the shit out of you. Because like the idea of meeting a person for lunch, fuck, what do I order? What do I say? Like, what do you, how do you like make the transition from the part where you're talking about whatever, their kids or some shit, like to the part where you talk about the work? Uh, that used to keep me up the night before, figuring out how to do that, right? And making sure I had the right sort of words to say. And I would say like too, I'm pretty good at the performing of the thing. Um, but I would be very nervous. I'm like not super witty on my feet. That like, what if they're expecting me to sort of be this thing and I can't deliver? It would be very, very awful. But so I found actually something really, really nice. And that if you sort of feel that way, if you feel like there's the part that's about the work and then there's a part that's about the rest of your life that you need to manage in order to be memorable, I found a nice little framework for starting conversations that are slightly deeper than the weather, but not so deep that you can't bounce back out and talk about the work whenever the time is right. and they may or may not end up being related to the work depending on where the person wants to take it. And it's called the report framework. So I could have made a deck this week, so you'll have to bear with me if you want to write it down, but I'm happy to repeat. So the report framework is this: R, what are you reading? E, what are you eating? That could be anything, right? New restaurants you've tried, recipes you're cooking at home, are you meal prepping, whatever. P, what are you playing? That could be games, sports, music, podcasts, what is currently being played in your life. O, obsessing. What are you obsessing over? What's the thing you're so into right now that you can't get enough of? That could go anywhere, right? And you could often start things like this with, I'm obsessing over this thing right now. How do you feel about it? R is recommending. I find this one to be very good. It's typically tied to one of the other ones. And T is trying, presumably for the first time. Another one to say, I have tried X for the first time. Anything you're doing for the first time, this is a good time of year for that also. You can rip them in order if you would like and if the conversation dictates. I have found that having this framework in my head gives me 6 things to go to if and when I need them that are, again, they tend to be light in nature, but interesting enough to engage a human being about a thing they might want to talk about. And then there's typically a reciprocal response, right? Oh, right now I was very interested in, I went to XYZ restaurant. It was really, really good. I'm eating blah, 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 blah. And then I've got something prepared to say in response. It makes the conversation feel like a thing I didn't have to try to pull really hard on threads to make natural. And then they typically flow from there. You can go in and out of work talk without feeling like pulling teeth. So if you can put those 6 in the back of your head, you have given yourself 6 backstops for a conversation if the work conversation gets, mm, the well runs dry a little bit. If you want me to repeat those at any point, you can always shout, and I'm happy to do so. But I found that the medium talk part of any sales conversation is really one of the big unlocks for being the type of salesperson or selling person that's memorable in a way that people want to call you. I got a couple more thoughts. Got a couple more keys actually, but I want to pause for 2 reasons. One, because I've been talking a lot, and two, because nobody else has been talking a lot. Anything resonating, particularly as being like, this is a thing I need or could use, or anything jumping out as like, this doesn't feel right in my experience. Curious how this is landing with the group. What's up, Lewis?
The preparation thing is so unbelievably important. I spitball and screw up preparation all the time because I think I'm okay with like an existing deck or something, and it's just, I mean, it's a mess. I recently tanked a presentation. Literally, you people only know this. I've talked to my wife about it, my shrink about it, my team about it, and that's it. Like nobody else knows except the people that I tanked it with. Um, and I tanked it because I wasn't prepared, but I also over prepared on something that was really dumb, which is I heard this person that I was pitching to um, didn't like small talk. So I rushed really hardcore in the beginning and forgot to introduce my team. Like it was a mess. So I just love that you brought up the preparation part. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting when we've been doing this for a long time. The slides feel like things we can do like sort of almost a second nature. And I find that even still, that isn't necessarily true. Like, well, like, I know it in my head. If nobody's looking, it's probably fine. Um, I had an old boss who was exceptionally rigorous. We'd prep for days and days and days before actual hard pitches, and he'd be in there with a stopwatch and we'd be on the clock. And so the words that were going to come out of my mouth They were not allowed to be read off the slide, but they were exceptionally clear, and I had a time limit. And so as a result of that, if I wanted to riff, I'd better be clear that I could do that riff sort of like in the allotted time limit in a way that didn't like make me look weird. A, because we didn't have time to fuck around, and B, because nobody else was going to do that in a way that was going to drop the ball. That was a lot of pressure, although we were quite good at presentations and pitching. But I think that that taught me too, when I take that upstream into conversations, like if I'm going to open my mouth and I'm going to start to say a thing, I had better not rattle off and sort of like and lose my place in the universe, because this has got to come back to a thing a person's going to respond to. And so some of that rigorous prep, I think, is like I found has been really, really helpful. Translates down to the pitch, but also into just a regular conversation as well. It's like, don't spin off into the universe, and also don't do the opposite of that. What's up, Phil?
So, I remember recently was in Vegas and we were on a call, a group call, and you said if you don't ask, you don't get. And I'm like, I can't ask. It just feels like salesy. And you're like, well, you gotta ask. And I'm like, but now you're saying like, well, don't be so obvious about it, or don't ask like what do you got? So now I'm like wondering what's the best way to approach it?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because it's the next thing I was going to talk about anyway. You're really good at intuiting where I'm going next, which I
It
deeply appreciate about you. Um, my key six, I literally wrote "ask for the thing you want." But so that same old boss that I had, who used to have the stopwatch and make us prepare, he always said, "Never be afraid to ask for the sale." He was an old advertising creative director, and what he literally meant was that every TV spot should tell you to buy the thing we were selling. He didn't literally mean give me this pitch. But I actually think that it's really good advice if you pull it outside of the context of sort of like asking for the piece of business you want. And if you think of the sale as the thing you need in that moment to move the thing forward, you should identify what the next thing you need is and just say, hey, can I have that thing? Um, if the thing you need is a piece of business, there had better be a bid or a scope of work on the table. And then you'd be like, hey, can I have this piece of business? What's it going to take for me to get this piece of business? If there is not a bid or a scope of work or a contract on the table, it would probably be inappropriate for you to ask for that. Which is why I always say set your intentions and be exceptionally clear on what the thing that you need to do in the room, physical or virtual, is to move the opportunity forward. And so if the next thing you need to do is to get on their vendor list, if the next thing you need to do is show up and take a tour of their office so you can meet their team, if it's to ask for a brief for the project that they're not quite ready to bid out, but you know they're doing, maybe you want to get an early look at it. If the next thing to do is actually get a proper CAPES meeting so they can meet your team, you need to have listened and been exceptionally clear what the next thing is, and then ask for that thing. Sounds to me like the next step for us is for me to send you a CAPES deck and us to get time to walk through it. Can we have that time next week? If we ask for the sale, the worst thing that can happen is no, which is probably the thing I said to you the last time we talked, Phil. But the sale isn't always the piece of business. The sale is the thing you need to move forward. How's that landing
so
with you?
is it about asking in small increments rather than asking like, what do you got for me?
I always believe it's about asking in small increments.
Mm, makes sense.
My biggest refrain I have found as a consultant is shorten the goalpost, shorten the goalpost, shorten the goalpost. My second biggest refrain is don't be the snake that tries to unhinge its jaw and swallow the deer whole. A, you might suffocate, and B, you look gross. Nobody wants either of those things. You can accomplish a lot by accepting that the win is quite small. I'm very interested in the idea that you can have a conversation and the win for that conversation is that person wants to talk to you again. It's incumbent on you on finding out when the right time is and saying, it seems like in 2 weeks we should talk again. I would like to talk to you again. Is it cool if I put it on your calendar? You have asked for the sale, you've gotten the sale, and now you're talking again. That's hard when you want a job, but it is the best way to win when you're playing the game, sort of um, A, in the long term, and B, at a high level. I also find this is the easiest place to chicken out, especially if you're having sort of like an introductory meeting, and especially if you have met in person. You got a coffee or a lunch or something like that, right? It feels really good. Vibes are high. I like this person. It seems like they like me. We have similar creative philosophies. It's like, oh, cool. Thanks for this. And then the dreaded, I don't have anything for you right now, but I'll hit you up when we do, right? You wouldn't believe how many clients I'll be like, oh, yeah, we had that meeting. And then I'll be like, how'd that meeting go with that person you were excited about? And they're like, great. And I say, cool. What's the next step? And they're like, the next step is they'll hit me up when they have something. And I'm like, okay, cool. So what I'm hearing is there's no next step, right? Um, it happens though, right? If you feel really good, you're like, there's no possible way that I didn't leave an impression on this person. Um, but I cannot say enough. That person is not thinking of you. I don't care how good the meeting was. I don't care if you did a backflip in the fucking coffee shop, dog. They are not thinking of you. Do you know how busy a person is? Like a working person in this industry? They are not thinking of you. I don't care if you're riding high on vibes. It does not matter. uh, Too many times. This person's for sure going to call when they have a project. 3 months go by, 6 months go by, a year goes by, and you have wasted an opportunity by not securing a clear next step and securing a reason to get back in their life to stay top of mind. It just doesn't work that way. And so you need to figure out what the next step is, no matter how small, Phil, to your point, and make sure that you are taking that next step, even if it's as simple as following up and talking again in 2 weeks, for them to tell you, thanks for following up. I still don't have anything for you. No one is ever thinking of you. Like it's just not how the game works. I think apropos of that, to circle back and talk a little bit about preparation, on the other side of that coin, arguably the most important, as important as preparation for me, is writing down your notes. What were the next steps as you saw them? Um, what were the things they said they were excited about or they wish their company would do? I don't care if it's like a project they're working on now or something that they were like, oh man, in 6 months we're going to launch X, Y, and Z and it's going to be awesome. I don't know. Was their kid about to start in their first ever varsity basketball game? Right. It like any of that stuff. When you write down your notes, you have a clear and compelling reason to follow up, and you have given yourself ways to be thoughtful when you do so. And then make notes on when you think it's appropriate. Sometimes a 2 day or 2 week follow up is appropriate. Sometimes the truth is that in 3 months, it's the right time to be just checking in. But if you're just checking in with, oh man, like I was thinking about you because I saw high school basketball. I wondered how little Joey's first fucking varsity game went or whatever the thing is, right? It does not matter, but you are the person who bothered to write it down and remember, and you're not the person who didn't bother. Uh, what's up, JC?
In the spirit of the report framework, if anybody's not using like some sort of AI note taker, I would recommend it personally because I've been using it since 2020 when it first came out. It was a little creepy and a little weird, but it's been one of the greatest tools that I've used every day now. And the amount of times that we go back and listen to the recordings or look at the transcripts or look at the AI, summary of it to be able to go back and make sure we hit exactly what they said or understand what we said we were going to do, that kind of thing has been, I would say, a game changer.
I couldn't agree with you anymore. I think we're at a place where it's really hard, especially when we're talking about a sales conversation, where you have got to be present in your conversation. You've got to be listening and showing up like a person who's speaking with conviction. You can't also be a person who's writing stuff down in real time. If you're
I'm
not
kind
doing
of
it, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm kind of sad that we're not recording this because I was taking rigorous notes and it's like rare that I do that anymore, especially on virtual.
Oh, I'm recording it on Zoom. I'll send it to you.
Cool.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, it's just got to be done. And again, in the moments when you're in person, make sure you make those notes. I encourage my clients when they have those meetings to take those notes and put them in the CRM. That person is either a 1 week or a 2 week follow up. They're either a 1 month, a 2 month, or a 3 month follow up based on whatever you learn in the conversation. And then you're going to drop those notes in the CRM in the exact same way. Whatever shows up in the CRM is the thing that you send them based on sort of like whatever you heard and whatever you think the next thing coming up is. That's the way that this sort of stuff has to get done. It's the way the ball moves forward. But when you're missing those things, it's like, oh, remember that person I talked to? Yeah, they were cool. Should we see what they're up to? And sometimes that works. Sometimes there's value in that. Um, but we can be just a little bit more intentional across sort of all of these um, all of these layers of the conversation, and they will move us from these early stages of our sales practice into a way where we can actually make progress. And Ron, to your point, +1 to what Phil said, Fathom is my favorite. I find that both the notes and the transcripts are really good, and they do a really good job. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate you. All right, team. I did a lot of talking. Anything else jump out at you all as things that are working or not working for you, or anything you guys want to double click into?
So when someone is not giving you a lot of attention and they're just like, I don't have anything for you, like what's a reasonable amount of time to follow up after? Or like what's regular? Like should you follow up every month or 2 months? Or like if you don't have like, the context that as you said, like based on what they said, you should follow up in like 2 months after like that basketball game or whatever.
I don't have an objective framework, but usually if you and I were talking one on one, you're like, all right, this person didn't have anything for me. I would just ask you, cool, do you think they're a 1, 2, or a 3 month follow up? And I would allow you to use your gut. And I think that would be based on their relative level of interest. So if you thought they were a good fit, but it just didn't seem like there was anything right now, there'd be no reason you couldn't try again in a month to see if there's a conversation. If that person was like, why is Phil still fucking talking to me? You should probably give him a few months. You know what I mean? So that would be truly as subjective as it gets, I think.
Especially as a creative, it's hard, like you don't want to feel like salesy or annoying and sometimes just following up like in a month feels like you're bothering them and I want to avoid that, but maybe I'm not as salesy as I think I am.
And I would say the one of the biggest refrains I have heard from creatives and from creative business owners is I don't want to feel like I'm bothering anyone. But in my experience, I don't have a hard number on this, although I could probably go back and figure it out with just like the data I've kept, but it's gotta be over 30% of sort of deals I've won from follow-ups have been from someone who's just saying, like, oh, good timing, I was thinking of you. And so like you've got to be at the right time in the right place. And if you're never doing it, then you're never going to be at the right time in the right place. And so like the number of times I've tried and not been in the right time and right place is infinity. But the number of times it's worked has been deeply, deeply satisfying. And so like you've just got to do the thing. And we can maybe for a future conversation talk about some frameworks for following up with someone you've spoken to before, a few keys for being as thoughtful as you can possibly be without showing up feeling like you've got your hand out. Because there are a few ways to do that. Again, if you've got some information about a person, about their organization, and you've got some intention around the ways you want to work with them, you can put a little bit of extra effort into saying, I was thinking about you and your organization in this way. here are some ways I'd like to engage, is now the right time, without, sort of killing yourself over an email with sort of like 4 paragraphs worth of really, really thoughtful thinking that they should pay you for. And they'd be like, don't you want this now? Which is something I've also been guilty of in the past. There's a line you can walk in between. But we can pin that for later. What's up, Lewis?
I think a lot, I think almost more than just figuring out the right time to write people back feels like you should think more about what you were talking about before with the increments, like defining the increments is like so to me vital, like because each of those increments is like an opportunity to have your brand resonate, like whether it's you, the person, or the company, or you, the person, the company wrapped up together, I mean, however it is, I think defining the increments and then effectively over time making increments happen because of how you show up and sell.
Yeah, I feel really strongly about your point about the increments. I wish really badly that I could show up and make a super cool impression on someone, and then they would want to hire my firm, right? It's like, oh man, that guy was rad as shit, right? Like we got to have his brain on all of our work, and it just doesn't ever work that way, where it doesn't enough of the time. And so the idea that you could hone in on those increments, and they could be those increments could be different than you just sending them a case study, right? Are really strong keys to unlocking some of that type of awareness that you're not going to get from more traditional marketing or more traditional sales tactics. I really like it. And again, if there's a little bit of point of view infused in some of those increments, I think all the better.
Yeah, I think the more you can do to draw them out, I mean, like it's a little bit like your report thing, but like having a steady stream of things that you put out to the client, but also that are about you as well, that they can like, I mean, some of this is about being on LinkedIn and publishing and like Blair Ends writing, writers write, yada, 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 that stuff. But I mean, creating increments, I think is like, to me, I mean, the more you can create them, the better opportunity there is just to have them. So yeah, I thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your point about writers, right, and being visible and present is really important. At some point, it's easy to think about one as a sales practice and one as a marketing practice. And our firm's so small, we don't have time for a marketing practice. I'm just doing what I can do as the founder. It's a very easy way to think, and it's very easy to like be guilty of that. I think the truth is that the line between those two practices, especially for small firms, is so blurry that it's not a line, right? Um, we just have to be doing it. And there is a symbiotic relationship between other human beings in the public, whether it's LinkedIn or Substack or whatever your sort of like, I don't know, platform du jour is. Um, Other human beings being able to see the way you think, and then you interacting one on one with a person who may or may not have seen the way you think, those things pay dividends of benefit to each other when you're doing them all. Um, it's hard to pick which one has more value because the answer is both all the time, and that's just not the way it's not the way your time works as a person. But we do kind of have to try. Neil, what's up?
All right. Hey Joe. So is it possible to like I've been in a situation where over prepared, right? On the total, I think kind of Louis said, but like, and then I'm sitting there and the conversation absolutely did not even touch anything that I prepared, the deck, none of that. Right. And then I throw my hands up and then, in the next one, I'm like, well, I'm gonna just do the opposite, So like, so how do how do we find that there's a balance sometimes in trying to figure it out? Because we I would research, right? You research company, you research everything they've done, what they're working, what they're going, all of these things. And part of me that is a little bit of perfectionist would maybe like hyper focus on the particular thing. And how do we just self check, in certain moments against that?
Yeah, it's a really difficult it's really difficult to feel like you have put the work in and you have somehow not succeeded. One of the questions I might ask you as a bit of a postmortem when things go poorly, like, is just to be honest with yourself, is like, how qualified was the prospect versus
Mhm.
how badly did I just want to sell to them?
Right.
And on the other side of that coin, like, everyone's a human being. Did the human being you were talking to, did they meet the criteria for the right person for you to sell to? And like, I don't know, man, maybe they were just having a bad day. Like, that stuff does happen. And
Yeah.
so if your tactics are generally successful, if
Mhm.
your pitch generally works for qualified prospects, it's okay that sometimes it bombs. I saw, I went to a stand-up show in LA last week, and I saw a few folks crush it. One guy who very specifically expected to crush it, but a few jokes bombed. And then I saw some real bombers, right? Folks trying out new material that was bad. But there was a guy who very clearly, like, most of his set worked, and then a few of his jokes were clunkers. And
Uh-huh.
that dude was like, oh, you could see that guy learn a thing. That was like, I'm never going to do that shit again, but was otherwise generally a confident performer, right? And
Mhm.
so, like, I found that to be very interesting. And I think that that level of self-reflection is relevant for you. Like,
Mhm.
if the thing generally works, it's all right if you swing and miss, right?
Yeah.
If there's a pattern emerging, if you get up on stage at the stand-up show and no one ever claps, you
Mhm.
might be bad at stand-up. And or your material might be poorly written. One of those two things might be true, right? It could be both.
Mhm.
Uh, I suspect that you, sir, are not bad at stand-up. It's possible your material might need a tweak, but like, I would encourage you to sort of like to reflect on if anything needs a tweak or if it's okay to just swing and miss once in a while.
Right. Makes sense.
Laura, I saw your question, and then Ron, I'll get to yours in the chat.
Yeah, it's similar to Ron's. Something that I always struggle with, because like in-person conversations for me, it's easy in a sense, but when it's a cold message or someone that you are trying to contact via LinkedIn or I don't know any platform, for me it's so hard to reach out, like someone that I really don't know. They don't know me. Well, they're from the States or Europe, and I'm from Colombia, so it's really hard for me to send them like a message that will connect to them. I can research them, but obviously there's some personal things that in person you connect with, and well, it's when it's cold you don't know anything about that person. So it's something that I really struggle with, and right now I'm trying to do that, but I really don't know how. I want to do it like in a proper way so that I don't miss much of those opportunities. But yeah, it's something that I ask myself a lot, like how can I reach to them in a way that is really attractive and that they will answer the whatever I write, or like it becomes like a relationship in a sense, but it's hard. I don't know how to start, like to break the ice in a sense. I don't know. Yeah.
It's a really common struggle. It's not specific to you. And Ron, this is related to your question as well, I think.
Yeah.
So over the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, for cold outreach, like a program that's working for my clients, a successful response rate, which is like getting a human to be like, yeah, here's some indication of interest, on average, like 1 in 100. So if we set that as a rough barometer for what I view as a successful program to be doing, 1 in 100 responses, that means for that to even be worth your time, you've got to be creating enough volume that you can afford to be doing, you can doing enough that 1 in 100 makes sense for you. If that's the case, you can't be writing them personally as though you already know them. A, because that's not a good use of your time as a principal or a leader. And B, because it'll weigh you down emotionally to like put effort into a thing and get 1 out of 100 as a response rate. And like, and just because, just because existentially that's hard. So I've actually found a couple of strategies for that to work. You've got to shrink that to a way that it can feel just personal enough that you look and sound like a person and not a bot. That's obviously an art in itself, right? But that it's replicable enough that you could create the volume should you want to. Some of the best strategies I found are in a category that you know really, really well. So it's like, I've worked with A, B, and C, and I would be excited to work with you because I see that you're doing X. It's true, and it's personable. It's personable enough if you write it correctly. That's a copy and paste you can send 100 times and be done in half an hour. That's a decent use of your time. I prefer LinkedIn over email. Deliverability rates don't work anymore. Like they don't work for you anymore. It's got to be on LinkedIn. Don't call anyone. That's a terrible choice. But it's the only way you can get through it with any semblance of your sanity. It will hurt your heart if you spend too much more effort on that. And another successful tactic I found is locally in your literal city or an area you're going to. I'm trying to expand my network in Kansas City. I work with XYZ people in this market, but I don't know as many people as I like in Kansas City. Would you be open to a coffee or a beer? My success rate went up like crazy when I started saying, would you like to meet me for a beer? Because I'm the type of person who would get a beer with someone. That's a thing I would lead with. And they're like, oh, this guy's not a bot. He's trying to get a beer. Right. And so those are a couple of ways in that anyone could try. But if you can shrink that level of outreach down such that it looks and feels like you in a way that you're not embarrassed of, but is replicable and scalable enough that you can get to a place where, like, if 1 in 100 is your internalized barometer, how many do you have to send that you're cool with it? That asks like 100 a day. So you or someone on your team has to send 100 a day. You can do 100 in like 20 minutes if you get good at it, but then you have to have 20 minutes a day. And you have to not quit, otherwise you will give up so fast. I'm working on some strategies for like getting real people to help folks like you all do it faster, but it's cold outreach is the hardest thing in the world. It's really tough. So if you don't like it and you feel that pain, I do also. What's up, JC?
I was going to say, I've seen some success. I don't know that I would consider it success at scale, but some success in spending the time on your LinkedIn network and doing your own research on your mutual connections, and then asking those people for a warm introduction to somebody in their network and being specific about who it might be. I've done exercises with that with different people in a room where we sit together and go through and say, like, do you know this person? Do you know this person? Do you know this person? And try to find somebody where they can make a warm intro as opposed to just straight cold outreach. I've had more of that 1 in 100 uh, response rate on a scaled basis with like a virtual assistant sending messages, and there's not a lot of responses that way.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of doing it in a room with others too. I think that is thoughtful and will maybe create enough volume again to be worth the time. I've only had success with that personally in very small doses. Like it of course works. I've only met like 3 people that way. Um, and so all of these things are like they are tough. The question is the opportunity cost of the time it takes to make it work. And so if we can carve out enough time to hit the volume required to get some wins, then it's great. If not, everyone's always looking around for the next best thing. The answer a lot of times with some of this stuff is there's not a silver bullet, but there is often something right under your nose. Um, I often tell folks, there's your inner circle. There's the folks you will call when you want and need a job. Current clients, past clients, the folks you have worked with a lot in your network that you know really, really well. And there's your second circle, people you're comfortable talking to about work and asking for stuff that you might not have thought of. And honestly, that's probably family and friends. That's probably people you play pickup basketball with, right? That's maybe folks at your kid's school. That's that second circle that you don't always think of, but you should start a conversation with. And I have actually found when I frame it that way, right? Your first circle and your second circle, These are folks that you may be close with, but you might not think of as being sort of like immediately a professional association. You can start different conversations that way. And typically, I find while those folks don't have jobs for me, they have intros for me that feel a lot warmer, right? Um, this is Joe. He's a friend who hosts a really great Christmas party every year. That I get that a lot. My wife and I host a big Christmas party, and it's like, oh, cool, you love Christmas parties, you should come to mine. Let's have a professional conversation. All of a sudden, we've got an icebreaker going. And so, I would also encourage, if we're having that conversation, like look at that second circle and treat it like these intro conversations we just spent the last hour talking about. Go ahead and go through your medium talk and just figure out where these things go. If you set your metric for just having conversations with folks and you feel your way through them, the work will materialize. But if you skip the part where you're exploring early on in your sales sort of cycle because you want someone who has a project for you, it's going to be a hard year for you. It's going to be a hard year for everyone, but it's going to be very hard. If you're waiting for the people to show up and say, here's an RFP, it's going to be a little rough. All right, team. As always, I appreciate everyone's time and attention in the open conversation. I love these very much, and I'm excited to talk sales and all things with everyone. And we'll be in touch with more sales content soon. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, see y'all later.